Fire was not an occasional disaster in the Middle Ages. It was a constant presence, a daily companion, an ever-waiting threat that shaped how people lived, slept, and even thought. Medieval life depended entirely on fire for survival, yet that same fire could erase entire families in minutes. It warmed homes during brutal winters, cooked food that could not be eaten raw without sickness, lit interiors that would otherwise be swallowed by darkness, and powered nearly every craft and trade. But fire never offered safety or mercy. It demanded constant attention, constant caution, and constant fear. And even then, it could betray you without warning. Medieval cities and villages were, by their very structure, built to burn. Most buildings were constructed from wood, straw, wattle, clay, pitch, and animal byproducts. Roofs were covered with dry thatch or reeds that aged, cracked, and became dangerously brittle over time. Years of sun, wind, and smoke turned them into tinder. Houses stood pressed tightly together, often sharing walls and leaning inward over narrow streets. Upper floors extended outward, almost touching across alleys. Fire did not need time to spread. Once one roof ignited, flames leapt effortlessly from house to house, faster than people could react. Inside medieval homes, fire burned almost constantly. Open hearths had no guards, no iron screens, no real containment. Flames were exposed. Sparks leapt freely into the air. Embers rolled unnoticed across floors covered with straw, rushes, or dried grass. These floor coverings were rarely replaced. Over years they absorbed grease, spilled food, animal waste, and moisture, forming thick layers of flammable material. A single ember, lost in the dim interior light, could ignite an entire home before anyone smelled smoke. Many homes lacked proper chimneys. Smoke escaped through roof holes, wall gaps, or open doors. When the wind shifted, smoke and sparks were pushed back inside. Families cooked, slept, worked, and ate within arm's reach of open flames. Children stumbled too close. Elderly people lost balance and fell into hearths. Clothing dried beside fires and ignited instantly. Burn injuries were common and terrifying. Without clean bandages or medical knowledge, burns often led to infection, fever, and slow, painful death. Candles and oil lamps multiplied the danger inside every home. They were cheaply made, burned unevenly, and tipped easily. A careless movement, a sudden draft, a curious child, or a wandering animal could knock one over. Oil spilled across floors and furniture, spreading fire instantly. At night, flames spread silently while families slept. Smoke filled rooms long before anyone woke. Many never did. Workshops increased the danger even further. Blacksmiths, bakers, brewers, candlemakers, glassworkers, tanners, and metalworkers all relied on intense heat. Forges burned day and night. Ovens glowed continuously. Hot ash, slag, and embers were discarded carelessly into streets or refuse piles. Entire districts were filled with fire-based trades, meaning the risk never disappeared, not even for a moment. Once a fire began, stopping it was nearly impossible. Medieval firefighting was slow, disorganized, and desperate. There were no engines, no hoses, no protective clothing. Buckets of water were passed hand to hand from wells or rivers. Leather pumps barely slowed advancing flames. Fire hooks were used to pull down buildings to create fire breaks, often scattering burning debris and spreading fire faster instead of stopping it. Water itself was often unavailable. Wells ran dry. Rivers were distant or frozen solid. During droughts, there simply was no water to fight fire at all. People stood helplessly, watching everything they owned burn, knowing there was nothing they could do. Wind transformed fires into uncontrollable infernos. Narrow streets acted like chimneys, pulling flames forward at terrifying speed. Firestorms formed, creating their own wind currents. Roofs collapsed inward. Walls cracked and fell. Burning beams and tiles rained down on fleeing crowds, trapping people in streets that had become corridors of fire. Panic magnified every danger. People rushed back into burning homes to save tools, clothing, food, or money. Parents searched blindly for children in smoke-filled alleys. Crowds pushed and crushed one another. Animals broke loose, spreading chaos and fire. Thieves looted abandoned homes while flames advanced unchecked. Fire destroyed more than buildings. It erased food supplies. Grain stores burned completely. Livestock suffocated or burned alive. Wells filled with ash and debris, poisoning water sources. Survivors faced starvation, disease, and exposure. Many who escaped the flames died weeks later from hunger, infection, or cold. Entire cities burned repeatedly. London, Paris, Hamburg, Florence, and countless smaller towns were consumed by fire again and again. Rebuilding became routine. Charred foundations were reused. The same materials went back up. Streets grew more crowded. Risk multiplied. Fire was expected, not exceptional. Night was the most dangerous time of all. Exhausted people slept deeply after long days of labor. Fires spread silently. Smoke killed before flames arrived. Families were found burned in their beds, frozen in their final moments, never knowing what happened. Winter made everything worse. Fires burned constantly for warmth. Homes were sealed against cold, trapping smoke and heat. More fuel was stored indoors. People fell asleep near flames to survive the night. One mistake meant death. Churches and religious buildings were no refuge. They were filled with candles, incense, wooden beams, cloth decorations, and tightly packed crowds. Fires during services killed hundreds at once, leaving burned bodies beneath collapsed roofs. Those who survived fires often carried the consequences for the rest of their lives. Burns healed poorly. Scars tightened skin and restricted movement. Pain lingered for years. Infection followed even minor injuries. Many died long after the flames were gone. Fear of fire shaped medieval behavior, law, and belief. Night watches patrolled streets. Curfews restricted candle use. Laws regulated hearths and thatch, though enforcement was weak. People prayed against fire as divine punishment, believing flames were signs of moral failure and divine anger. Yet fire remained unavoidable. There was no alternative. No electricity. No gas. Fire meant warmth, food, work, survival, and death. Fire was never rare. It was expected. Every flame was a gamble. Every night carried risk. Medieval people lived knowing everything they owned could vanish before dawn. That their home could become their grave. That survival depended not only on care, but on luck. Fire did not need war or invasion. It needed only a spark. And in the Middle Ages, sparks were everywhere.